We're going to get into some statistical data. This is one of those who are talking about trends of imports and exports, and we have somebody on that is a good friend. I've got to meet Ken Roberts a long time ago, and Lalo, I'm going to tell you, this is just fantastic. I always love it when we have Ken on, but with that, I mean, there's been so much change in everything. Even I imagine with the different changes going on, have you seen a change in what courses people are signing up for to try and get themselves, proficient in handling all this stuff?
Right. I guess we have. I mean, we've seen a shift heavily from we used to get a lot of exporting course signups, people signing up for exporting. And of course, because of the tariff situations here in the last 12 plus months, we've had obviously an abundance of our tariff classification course, just so people can understand tariffs and all that. So yeah, I mean, that's been the shift in the last, like I said, 12 plus months. I feel we're still getting a lot of USMCA, but I feel we'll start getting quite a few more once it's redone in whatever shape, form, or iteration of that free trade agreement might be. But we're now trying to figure out how that course is going to change, and not only that, but our textbook. We have a huge textbook on that. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, I do see those trends obviously following and moving along. So
Well, it's one of those where I know that people feel overwhelmed, and yet at the same time trying to get up to speed. And it's I think it's indicative of moving from just technical skills, hence the classification and things of that nature, to hopefully improving their skills in becoming more strategic. But with that, I will say Ken Roberts is our guest today. He's from WorldCity. Is it Publications?
WorldCity. We're mainly digital these days. We were once a publication. Did a lot of publishing in the old days, do some now, but mainly digital.
Well, folks, I'm going to tell you, and I'm not doing this for like a commercial or something like that, but I'm telling you, you really need to check out WorldCity. There are you'll find if you've not already listened to Ken on past shows and some other publications he's been a part of. I'm telling you, this guy is so smart. It just scares me to death. And yet he's got information that is so valuable to y'all. So
yeah,
go ahead.
I think, Ken, you need to rename that website to like probably something like Rabbit Hole City or something. Because once you go in there,
you get in there and you just keep going. Well, let me dig into this one and that one, right?
It is so much data and so much information. I know I could easily spend a whole day, and I'm like, oh, geez, I just spent a whole day in this website, because it's just lots and lots and lots of data. I mean, I don't know how y'all's head does it. I guess you look your age where you're probably like around 25 years old or something, right? Having to crunch all those numbers and everything.
So I had my birthday last week. I'm 26.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. I love it. Welcome, Ken. It's like I am really excited to get into this discussion today, but how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I mean, it's great to be here. You guys have a great show. Weren't you voted one of the best trade podcasts out there or something like that? Wasn't that true?
Yeah. the guys from the trade guys and us keep on joking about that, on how I don't know how they get those rankings, honestly, because I don't provide any of my numbers to anybody. But hey, if they want to call us the best one, that's fine. If they want to call us the second best, that's fine. I don't mind being in the company of the trade guys at all.
Yeah,
they're good. They're great, and you guys are doing a great job too. And it's a lot of hard work, and so you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we start off with what do you have for us today? Talking about statistical data, quarterly updates, and things of that nature.
So we'll get back to it toward the end here, but President Trump will be with President Xi in China on Thursday. Yeah. So we'll talk about that at the end, sort of what has happened. I looked at some data from what has happened from 2018 to now. And so we'll sort of look at what has changed in that relationship. And trust me, it's a lot. It's a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's filtered through the entire system, right? I think, when all is said and done, Trump will be the most significant president in terms of trade policy since, well, maybe ever, but in a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been just a whole lot of change in how we think about trade and so forth. And I'm reading a great book about that whole dynamic right now. But anyway, so we'll talk about it. I'll do a little bit on the overview of trade. First quarter data is out. I'll talk a little bit about some of the countries that are kind of particularly interesting that are showing some real changes. I'll look at a few exports, a few imports, and then we'll dive into some more data on China. But so through the first quarter, U.S. trade was off slightly, about 3.5%. 3.5% is equal to $51 billion. But 3.5%. Exports were up 15.37%. That's $80 billion. It's a lot. Imports were way off 13.89%. And that's 131 and change billion. So what does that do to the deficit? Well, the deficit is the lowest it's been since 2020. It dropped from, so last year, this time in the first quarter, now you have to remember what was going on last year at this time in the first quarter. Everybody was front loading everything to get ahead of the Liberation Day tariffs. So March, the deficit went over 400 billion, just off the charts. This year it's down to 213 billion. So a very big drop in that deficit, U.S. trade deficit, right?
Hey, hang on just a second.
Yep.
Just for our listeners, folks, when we're talking deficit at this point, we're talking about the trade deficit, which means U.S. has traditionally for decades and decades now has been importing more goods than it has been exporting. And that difference, when you look at it, is what we're calling the trade deficit. Not trying to be overly simplistic for some of you folks that are so advanced on that, but just to make sure all of our listeners are up to date
and
here.
That's a good point. Good point to interject that the data comes from the U.S. Census Bureau, which gets it from Customs and Border Protection. And all the data I'm going to talk about is what's called a 4-digit level. So again, not too deep into the weeds here, but you can get data at 2-digit, 4-digit, 6, 10-digit level. More specific at 10-digit, very general at 2. We chose 4, and I'll be talking about that when I talk about exports and imports. Go ahead, Andy.
Okay, well, the other thing about it is that understand this: for every $1 billion in trade, that equates to 10,000 jobs. So that was an economic study that I was personally did back in 2017, 2018, as I was looking at this. And so when you're looking at and when we're talking about the 10,000 jobs, some of that equates to that 10,000 may be from another country that is manufacturing the goods, but then you also have some of that comes into the import. Obviously, there's jobs to clear it, transport it, retail it, all that. On the flip side, when you have an increase in exports, most of the 10,000 jobs are in the U.S. So that's, when we're talking a trade deficit, we've been importing a lot more, hence manufacturing has left the U.S. in the past and all that. Hence some of the trade policies are trying to revive some of the U.S. marketing, agriculture, and things of that nature. All right, so saying all that, sorry to take a sidestep, but trade deficit, as you just said, is interesting. I didn't realize that trade deficit is smaller than 2020.
No, than 2024, 2025. Sorry, 2025 was when Trump had announced early in the year, I'm gonna have this big tariff policy, right? And it was gonna be the April 2nd Liberation Day tariffs. So suddenly, every shipper who got everything they could on a ship or on a plane to get into this country as quickly as possible. And so you might see that sort of level off through the course of the year, would be my guess. And I'll add, just because you can't say some of this stuff often enough, I think, Andy, you're right in sort of explaining what a deficit and a surplus is. The data we're talking about here is merchandise trade data, and there's also service trade. And the United States has a surplus in service trade because we're very good at things like tourism, which may not seem like an export, but it is, because a person from another country is bringing their money to this country and leaving it here, essentially. Education has traditionally been a big one, and so forth. There's many, insurance, legal, all sorts of things like that can be service exports as well. But this is just merchandise trade, and it's just we talk about the movement of goods, where it moves through what ports and so forth like that. And the website, by the way, that if you want to go into the rabbit hole, as Lalo was talking about, which we use that same term here, by the way, about going down the rabbit hole, and you look up and it's 3.5 hours later, and you go, oh my God, where have I been? Is ustradenumbers.com. And I also write a column for Forbes 5 times a month. The website, Forbes.com, website on trades. One statistic that hasn't changed very much through all this, because a lot of the data I'm going to talk about is big changes. The one that hasn't changed significantly and it moves very slowly is the percentage of exports to imports. And over the course of the last 30 years, the range has been, I'm going to guess here, 44% exports down to 37% exports. Moves in a very narrow band because it's hard to move that number. So right now it did move up a little bit with this deficit dropping to 42% of our trade is an export. That would mean 58% is an import. I hope my math's right on that one. That was pretty simple. So that one doesn't change much, but let's take a look at some of the countries. So we'll start with China because that's the one that people pay a lot of attention to. China's trade from comparing this quarter to last quarter is down 34.38%. It's a very big drop.
Wow, that's a huge drop.
Switzerland is down 47.62%. And we'll talk about what's going on there in just a minute. Ireland is down 69.92%. We'll talk about that, what's going on there. Taiwan is up 79.09% and is almost equal to the U.S. trade with China now, Taiwan. And we'll talk about what's going on there. Mexico's up 7.41%. Mexico is the number one U.S. trade partner. Vietnam's up 40%, better than 40%. Okay. So, and I forget, I can share my screen and show some of this stuff, I guess, if you want, right?
You could.
We'll do that in a minute. We'll share some of these in a minute.
Sure.
So let's now talk about some of these countries that I mentioned where there's the big changes in what's going on there because it'll show up in the exports and imports. So we'll look at exports first. Gold is now the number one U.S. export. And it was number 5 at this time last year. It's up 288%, which is about $33 billion. Silver was number 245 at this time last year, right? There's about 1,200 of these exports and imports at this 4-digit level. It's number 245. It's now number 11. It's up 4,333%. 59 billion. So why is that? And which of the countries does that generally tie into most? That ties into Switzerland most. Switzerland is a processing hub for gold. They process it, they distribute it, they store it. Some of that goes on in London as well. But so when Trump first announced those tariffs, it created certain uncertainty in the marketplace, right? And so what do people do when they're a little bit frightened? They want gold. So a lot of gold that was in Switzerland needed to come to the U.S. to meet some contracts that existed in this country. And some of that gold is now going back, and you'll see it on the export side, import side as well. So gold now is heading back to Switzerland, and that's what's going on there. And silver is a piece of that as well. So I'll switch over to the imports. Taiwan, I mentioned, big jump. That's almost completely computer equipment for AI data servers in this country. Okay, so computers, the import of computers into this country from last year to this year has doubled. It's up more than 100%, up 45 billion year to date, which is, just massive. The other one that's the two that have dropped significantly, and the first one will tie back into Switzerland. It's called articles with precious metals, but when you look deeper into the data, instead of the 4-digit level all the way down to the 6, 10-digit level, you see it's largely gold. And that's down 98%. So the gold, that is not coming back this way right now. And then the other one is GLP-1 drugs. I think most of us now heard of that acronym that we didn't know 2 years ago. That's what was going on with Ireland. That was a flood of Wegovy, Ozempic, all those.
The weight reduction stuff.
Weight reduction drugs were flooding this country. And I'll show you some charts in a minute on some of the ports and some of these products. Those are now down 98% this year because they just exploded last year. And I'm curious. I'm trying to make sure that it's not being put into another category, which happens sometimes, but I can't see it anywhere else. So it's very surprising that because they're still advertising like crazy. Maybe they brought so much in, they've got enough to keep people happy for a while.
Well, I was just going to say is that I'm wondering if there is a U.S. manufacturing or somewhere else they're manufacturing that stuff, but that's patented.
Yeah, that's Eli Lilly and the other one. There's two of them. Novartis,
Novartis, I think.
Whatever it is. Those are the two that are making these drugs right now. And they're largely coming from Ireland, but the figure I gave you was global. So this is all the imports of this stuff. And so that's having a big effect. That had a big effect, for example, on the ranking of ports. So for many, many, many years, Port of Los Angeles was the nation's #1 port by value. And by the way, I compare them by value. Seaports tend to look at containers. They tend to look at tonnage, something like that. But you can't compare airports and seaports and talk about tonnage because planes won't fly with that stuff, right? So I look at value. It's sort of, makes it a fair fight, if you will, or fair competition. And then border crossings, they don't release tonnage data, weight data into this country. So value is what it is. So for years, Port of Los Angeles was #1. Laredo became #1 because as China went down, as we talked about, and Mexico went up, that benefited Laredo and hurt Port of Los Angeles. Last year, all that gold shifting went through JFK basically. And all that, the GLP-1 drugs or a large part of them, and a lot of those servers, computers, hardware went through O'Hare. So last year, for the first time, you had 2 airports that ranked first and second among all the nation's ports, JFK and O'Hare. Laredo was 3rd and Port of Los Angeles was 4th. Now I just looked for this year, you still have an airport at #1, but for the month of March only, Laredo is back on top. So we'll see how it shifts out as the year goes by. So let's now talk a little bit about, and then I'll show you some of these charts if you want. We can go back through these things by looking at the charts. China. Exports to China since 2018 have dropped 4.93 billion. Okay. And we know some of that stuff is going to be soybeans, it's going to be passenger vehicles, it's going to be oils. Oil's down 2.27 billion. China used to be the #1 buyer of U.S. oil. It is not now. For 3 consecutive months in the last 6 months or so, they bought zero oil, which is kind of surprising given the situation going on in Iran. Because that's where they used to get most of their oil. Sorry about that. And so the other one, passenger vehicles, a lot of passenger vehicles went also to China. I think, though, those were largely BMWs manufactured in South Carolina, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But that's down 1.68 billion from 2018. But otherwise, there's no big decreases. Now, the figure now is 4.93 billion. Imports from China are down 62 billion. So a big difference there. Oh, I should mention, computer chips are up about 1 billion. Some vaccines and plasma stuff, that's up more than 1 billion. Soybeans are up almost 1 billion, even though they've had much bigger increases. If you want to know if it's personal between Trump and Xi as they begin this, if you look at the soybean exports from the U.S., from 2018 till Biden's president, they dropped way down. Biden comes in, he didn't reduce any tariffs, doesn't change anything. All of Trump's tariffs essentially stay in place, right?
Right.
Soybean exports go way up again. Trump comes back in office, back down again they go. Now, Trump made the threats of 145% tariffs and so forth like that. But there's this block right there in the middle where the soybeans are back up. So there is some, they both want to talk about how they're good friends and they respect each other, but there's some grinding the gears.
There's some saber rattling and one does the other. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how this summit goes. So imports from China overall, as I mentioned, are down 62 billion, which is a lot. And that's why they're not the #1 U.S. trade partner anymore. Cell phones are down more than 12 billion. China is not consistently the #1 supplier of cell phones anymore. A lot of that has shifted to India, shifting to Vietnam, other places. Computers are off almost 10 billion. That's obviously going to be now coming from Taiwan. And the thing that people are starting to talk about a lot, and it have been for years, but rules of origin, are those rules of origin being dodged and played with somehow? Is the manufacturing that was in China really moved to these other places, or is something else going on there? Computer parts are down. Furniture is off $2 billion. Electric storage batteries are up a little bit. So that's sort of the quick overview. And if you want, I can try to pull up some charts to show you guys that I think will be useful to look at. Let me I think I can share my screen here, right? Let's see, where's my share? There's share button. Screen. And let's see what we got here. Okay. And I think maybe I'll make this one a little bigger, right? So this is our #1. These are our trade partners. Let me switch to year to date there. So this is, again, from ustradenumbers.com. and you can see it across the top. I've got a lot of tabs open you're going to see if you want. But so Mexico's number one with 16%, Canada number two, and then China number three. But look at the difference between Canada and Taiwan, 6.22% to 5.77%. It's amazing. Vietnam, now number five, ahead of South Korea, ahead of Germany, ahead of Japan. Vietnam has gotten a lot of those merchandise that used to come from China. No one has benefited more than Vietnam.
All right. Hey, Ken, just a second. This is a great chart, and I want people to stop for a second and think. The largest economies in the world, obviously the U.S. is number one. China is the second largest economy in the world. Number 3 and 4 are Germany and Japan. And so what's interesting to me is you see, as far as the largest economies, not necessarily largest geographically countries, but the largest economies are out there. And yet you see countries that have smaller economies, significantly smaller economies, and yet they're the biggest source for a lot of goods into the U.S. That's right. Unbelievable. Well, and you're saying trade partners, so this is both imports and exports too, right?
But you're right. The ones you are mentioning that are ahead of Germany and Japan are largely enormous importers.
Yes.
Taiwan,
Vietnam,
South Korea.
That's one of those is just in looking at it, don't look at always the larger economies as far as opportunities. There's going to be opportunities in some of these others. All right, so I'm back to you.
I switched back to 2025 while you were talking, and look where Germany and Japan are now.
Yeah, they're ahead of Vietnam, South Korea, but still Taiwan is ahead of them. So Taiwan has been pretty consistent
for the last
that, right?
12 or so months.
Yeah,
Taiwan has really jumped up because of AI.
Yeah.
Because look, you'll use AI at some point today. I'll use it at some point today. Our listeners will probably use it at some point today. It's being used a lot, and so they need these data farms, data servers, centers. They need more and more computing power. They're just pouring money in like crazy. So that's what's going on there. And let me see about March. I didn't look at March before, but so there's March. So yeah. Let's see what I got here next. Let's see what this one is. I think this one's the same thing. So let's look at this one here. This is exports. We talked about that a little bit. So here's the exports into the United States.
And these are the commodity or the industries, if you will, commodity industries.
So this number 2, civilian aircraft and parts, is essentially Boeing or Boeing led, and was forever number 1. They had some mishaps. Then they had the pandemic. They finished last year, I believe. They did finish number 1 last year, I think. Yeah, they were number 1 again last year. So it was the first or second year back to number 1. They've been number 1 forever. And as you can see, the one that's to me very interesting, is this one here, oil. That's our number 4 ranked export. It didn't used to be anything. And, then whatever it's been now, 15 years ago, whatever that is, a couple things happened. You had hydraulic fracturing coming online. We had the Congress during the Obama administration said, let's end this oil embargo from the 1970s. And suddenly we started exporting oil all over the world. Now a lot of it goes to Netherlands and Korea where it gets processed into gasoline. But again, China used to be a big player in that, but is no longer.
Well, and what's interesting too on that, to your point, you got the oil. Right below that is liquid natural gas, so which is still petroleum. So you have 2 things there that are significant.
Well, and gasoline's right here, number 3.
Number 3, yeah.
So
we petroleum. All right, that's one thing though, and these are exports. So one of the things to point out is
we have a surplus in gasoline and natural gas.
Yes.
And oil is getting closer and closer.
And the point is that the job market, I guess, if you will, for that has probably exploded. It's gone up significantly.
Yeah. Now we'll switch over to imports here. And here are those computers that are coming from Taiwan. About, I'm going to guess now, 6 to 8 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, cell phones passed computers for the first time. And it looked like that was going to be forever and ever because we all have cell phones and we all get a new cell phone every couple of years, it seems. But computers now have come back ahead. Last year is going to look probably similar. I don't think it'll be change. So, passenger vehicles. So cell phones so far this year, and that's where they have no cell phones have now passed this year, at least temporarily, passenger vehicles. And why is that? Because there's big tariffs on cars. There's big tariffs on all imports, and you're seeing a big decline in those. Oil is down to number 4. Oil used to be, look at that. Oil used to be our number 1 import. Number 1. So let's see what we got here. We'll talk about. We can talk about beef for a second. So in the news, I think just yesterday, President Trump said he's going to eliminate or reduce the tariffs on beef imports, and which is curious because in the past he said that tariffs don't affect the price we pay, but he's going to reduce those tariffs on beef to bring down the price of beef, right? So this is just a quick look at. Let me get rid of this guy. There you go. This is a look at imports of frozen beef year to date, so way up. And frozen beef will come from places, not generally speaking, but I'll scroll down here and you can see where it comes from. So frozen beef comes from places where they can't really bring it in fresh. Oh, this is 25. Let me switch to year to date on it here. So Australia, Brazil, New Zealand, Uruguay. So my guess is what he's got in mind is Brazil, because Lula was just in the White House earlier this week, last week. And then this is the fresh stuff. This is, what was that? This is imports of frozen beef. I want imports. Do I have imports of fresh? Export. Oh, I don't have imports of fresh. Oh, well. So, and then here's, that's the same thing. So let's go to exports of frozen beef. And they're off a little bit, as you'll see when I scroll down. They're off a little bit and have been for a few years. And the frozen stuff tends to go far. So that will go to places like South Korea, Hong Kong. Let's switch this to year to date to be apples to apples. South Korea, Hong Kong, Japan, Taiwan. Those tend to get the frozen stuff. And did I have fresh beef?
Which is U.S. beef going that way, folks.
Yes, correct. This is U.S. beef that is now fresh or chilled, and you'll see it has to stay closer to home. It's going from. Oh, that's surprising to me. I think that's not. Let me hold on here. This is frozen. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Here's frozen. This is where frozen beef goes. South Korea, Hong Kong, Japan, Taiwan.
Right.
Okay. That's where you see the frozen stuff go. Let's see what we got here. So let's talk about, this looks to me something on China. So here's the exports to China. We can talk about soybeans now. We talked a little bit about them. So in 2025, exports of soybeans were not even number 1. And they used to be half of all the value of all exports to China were soybeans, right?
This is 25.
This is 25 I've switched to here. So now we got natural gas, hydrocarbons, which are probably used for a bunch of things involving plastics, petroleum products, plastics. Okay. You switch forward now, because they went last year, how many months? Was it 5 months they went without buying any soybeans? They went a long time. Brazil has essentially taken over as the top player with China's export. And I don't know we're going to be able to get that back anytime easily or quickly. Of the association for the soybean growers actually spent some time in the Middle East and some other Asian countries last year trying to draw up those markets. We switch now to year to date, and there you go. Soybeans are up.
Holy crap.
Okay, so that the Chinese had sort of promised they would start buying some soybeans, and they did. But again, in the past, they've been at 50+% of the total. And so not quite back at the numbers they were, but they're up certainly from last year. And let's see. So here's soybean exports to China. So there you can see March of 2025 way down.
This is about a 40% increase over last year.
It's a big increase over last year. And but you can see where it was.
But significantly lower than 2023. That's what it says.
Yeah, it's about half of as much of 2023.
Yeah, and if I switch it to the year, so it doesn't have any 26 data here, you can see what happened. So again, so here's sort of Biden, here's the Trump years,
Yeah.
2018 dropped way off, came back a little bit because they need their soybeans, right? China needs the soybeans. They need those soybeans. They're the largest consumer of soybeans in the world, needless to say. But during the Biden years,
tofu.
Yeah, and they use it feed. They use it for feed. They use it for a lot of things.
Yeah.
And here's the Biden years, but there's Trump again. So, that's why, this here now we'll look at Taiwan. So you can see what's going on there. Let me shrink this one. I'm going to shrink this one a second so you can see everything there. So here's Taiwan. Look at that. That's
Oh,
what they
and
call a
that is
hockey.
a testament. Okay, so the significant increase in trade with Taiwan, obviously we keep coming back. It's the chips and the AI, all these different AI applications from,
Mainly computer
Elon Musk
hardware.
is probably the
Yep.
most common. You hit the chat GPT is a common thing, but all these different AI applications and new ones being developed require data centers that hold massive amounts of data. But then you've got to have these chips, these processors to be able to process, if you will, that data and filter through for what you're looking for. And then hence the computers, they're like supercomputers to be able to not only hold the data and the storage thereof, but then to process it, filter it, access it, pull it back. So there are data centers that are being built like almost like an epidemic. They're being built all over the country.
Yep.
And but the other thing, folks, on AI, a lot of this AI technology is very, shall we say, somewhat industry focused in certain areas. Others are general, like the chat GPT could be all over the place. Regardless, that's why it's so important as far as Taiwan. That's the biggest chip maker in the world.
They are the biggest chip maker. This is actually not just the chip. This is actually the computer hardware as well.
Yeah.
But, we lost sight of how amazing it was when Google came out and said, here's the 10 best sources of information you can ask for about whatever you're asking about.
Right.
We're not amazed at that anymore. And now these, whether it's Claude or Perplexity or Gemini or Chat, they will say, here's what you're looking for. And here's where we got the information for you, but we put it together in an answer for you. Do you have to still kind of check behind them? Of course you do. But it's pretty astonishing how quickly you can get answers to almost anything. It really is. But
and
also pushback now in a lot of these communities that you're talking about around the country. Some don't want these big data centers there because they take enormous amounts of electricity. Yeah.
Well, and out of all that too, the scenario here, though, when you're talking about the AI, think of the latest episodes of like Star Trek, and they're like computer, and they'll talk and they'll say something. I mean, we're we're not too far off from I want to know and it'll kicks back on it. So I mean, we're moving down that road really quickly.
Yeah. Pretty soon we'll be at the Jetson level where we'll be in flying cars, right?
Yeah, those 2-hour days are killing me, kind of thing.
So here's Ireland.
Okay.
And so you can see again, look at this is the big spike last year in the first quarter. Let's look at 25 here. I'll switch to 25 so you can see it. That's a straight up cycle. You got the in case people aren't, I should say, in case people aren't watching this, they're listening to it. I'm showing what's called a horizontal bar chart with each year has the bar going from left to right, and it shows
significant increases.
The increases. So you can see a huge increase, and as you can see, to your point, it's all light blue, not dark blue. Light blue being imports, and if you switch to year to date, you can see the big drop off there. And again, I'm still kind of suspicious. I can't believe suddenly there's no more market for these GLP-1 drugs. Something else is going on there. And I look, sometimes they reclassify things because GLP-1 drugs are not actually a hormone. They just act like a hormone in your body. But that's the category they put in.
But if you look from 24 to 25, there is such a significant increase that I'm wondering if there was such a buy on that, hence because of maybe tariffs or something, that the companies wound up, buying it to store it and then are selling it off. I don't know.
That very well could be.
I mean, we're talking about 3 or 4 times more?
4 times, yeah.
Imported in 25 over 24.
More than
about
4
times as much, I guess.
Or 4. No, it's 4. 13 times 4 is 52. Yeah, it's a big jump. So now we'll jump to Switzerland here, and you see a similar sort of thing. All that gold that was coming into this country to meet that demand for the contracts or whatever was going on. They needed that in New York, all came to JFK. A lot of that is some of that's going back out. And I'm just looking here at, this is overall with Switzerland. You can see similar situation with United Kingdom, but you can see a big shift there. Look at that big jump there.
Yeah. A lot more. Wow.
So here's a change over time. So this just looks at how has it grown over time, not what's the value, but how's the change. And then, computers over time gone up a little bit, gone down a bit, and then boom, just take off. They just take off, right? So the national growth at 97%, the market share is 100, so it's, and you can look at it here and see the same thing. This is every month. You can see the big climb here. Okay. The similar one that I've showed you before is that one. And there's Taiwan.
Wow.
So 42% this year is Taiwan. Mexico's a big player too in this space. Mexico has always been a big player in the computer world because Foxconn is down there just across from El Paso.
Yep.
And so they're bringing in a lot of computers from there.
Well, and down in Guadalajara too, there's a huge amount being manufactured there.
As you see, last year, Mexico was number one. So that's 2025. And now it's Taiwan.
So far this year, Taiwan's got the lead in Mexico. Okay.
Here's gold exports. Again, just big increase in the exports. That was imports last year compared to this year. I can make that a little bigger.
Ken, as we're looking at this, let me ask this question.
Sure.
I mean, there's some surprises in some of this, and others, if you stop and think logically, it's not so much of a surprise, hence the Taiwan situation. Are there any trends that you are watching that business leaders, in your opinion, should be, maybe they're missing or they're not keeping up on it?
Well, there's an expression from the Austin philosopher Jerry Jeff Walker, which was, it's a good day for fellows to carry umbrellas. There's so much change. Certainly if you'd invested in gold a couple of years ago, you'd done very well. I can't remember if I told you this last time we were talking, but I lost my wedding band after 30 some years.
Yeah.
Gold at that time was about $2,500 an ounce. And I thought, well, I'll just wait till it goes down. It's still up toward $5,000. Somebody whoever got that wedding band of mine, I hope they held on to it and make the profit instead of giving it back to me. There's so much change. I mean, here, let me give you an example. China, number one trade deficit with the United States for many years, right? Does China still have the number one deficit? No. Can you guess which country does? It's been 3 different countries in the last 4 or 5 months. That's how hard it is to figure out where things. It's been Mexico, it's been Vietnam, and it's been Taiwan. Taiwan because of all that computer hardware. Vietnam
Right.
because of all the excess that moved over to from China, and Mexico just because it's a juggernaut. They're a huge trade partner. The big thing that I'm paying attention to now is what one of you, I think you alluded to, Andy, earlier on, is USMCA. What's going to happen there? Is it going to be separated out? It's going to be a Mexico deal and a Canada deal, and then Mexico's going to do a Canada, or because it'll have a big impact. Canada is far less important to us as a trade partner than it ever was. Canada, let me see if I have that.
Well, the biggest things from Canada for the U.S. is going to be, there's oil and there's also,
yep,
those are 2 of the biggest industries there too.
Yep.
I don't know what else we've got as far as that. I don't have the statistics in front of me.
Canada supplies
pharmaceuticals too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Big import from Canada is gold. I mean, it is oil. And we're now increasingly have a lot of oil.
Mm-hmm.
Oil is a complicated market. I bet a lot of the oil that comes from Canada then gets refined and exported out as gasoline, for all I know, or maybe reshipped out as oil. But it's a complicated market, how global markets work. And that's why, when we were hit in the 1970s with that oil embargo, and we said, we can't export oil anymore. And then Frac came along and said, we can become energy independent. We won't be affected by anything going on in the Middle East. Well, it turns out we're still affected, right? Gas is up 50% in the last month from the invasion of Iran. So it's a truly global market, hard to figure out. I like to say, I know you want me to make some predictions that people can go run and make a lot of money with, but I like to say that I'm much better at predicting the past than the future, and I'm not even not even perfect on that one. But it's I'm watching USMCA. I'm trying to figure out, what is going to change. What's going to change. A lot of these things that are going on in the market have to do with President Trump and his policies, but not all of them. AI is not about Trump.
Right.
Gold is certainly in part about Trump, but computers aren't. The GLP-1 drugs are not about Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're an airport or a seaport or a border crossing, or if you're a logistics provider, it's hard to know exactly which way things are going. I mean, as I mentioned, I write these columns for Forbes website,
Mm-hmm.
and I for the last one I did, I was writing about passenger vehicle market, and so I'm pulling. Here's the biggest ports in the country that handle motor vehicles. I pulled 4 ports, and I pulled their monthly data, their year-to-date data, their annual data, big spreadsheets. And here are the countries that we get cars from, and here's the countries we send stuff. I had 20 to 30 Excel spreadsheets in front of me, because there was this deadline that was going to happen the next day when Trump was going to slap 25% tariffs on the EU. Well, before I could write the story, he pushed it off to July 4th. So it's very hard to, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's very hard to predict which way these things are going to go. The thing that has been very true is that trade has continued to grow for the most part. Some of that's inflation, but a lot of it's just, we have a very strong economy here. There's some signs that credit card debt's going up a little bit, which is, can be worrisome, but I think our economy still is probably the envy of the world, or one of the strongest in the world. China's got some real problems that they're trying to deal with. I would say I'd be surprised if oil prices don't come down at some point, but they may go up before they come down.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a lot of oil in this country that is from the United States. We have gas, we have natural gas, we have manufacturing. There's certain things we're going to always import. We've really never really made cell phones in this country. We haven't made TVs in this country in a long time. I think at some point, which we'll also have to do, is get a much better grip on merchandise trade that I alluded to earlier. How much do we really know about? Because, when you talk about goods, well, here's the car. This is the value of the car. It's crossing into the country. Merchandise trade's difficult if you guys got a sponsor who was from outside this country for your podcast, for example. That would be an export, right? And is anybody going to calculate that export? Probably not. So service imports are very hard to track. But I think the whole world outside China, at least, has awakened to the fact that we can't. I can stop sharing this chart now if we want. Is awakened to the fact that we can't have all our manufacturing in one country.
Right.
We can't have so much of our manufacturing in one country. But one of the things that's going to come up in USMCA, I'm sure, is right now we bring in a lot of cars from Mexico, right? I think it's probably our number one source of vehicles now. And some of them are U.S. cars. There's Ford and GM cars in there, what these call Chrysler cars in there. But there's also BMWs and everything else. Guess who else is manufacturing cars in Mexico now?
China.
So there's going to have to be a carve out if you don't want Chinese cars coming in. And they're largely EVs, and they're a major threat to Tesla and others, because people I know in Mexico, and Lalo, you may be the same, those EVs in Mexico, BYD, and those, they say they're terrific. They're inexpensive. They're, amazing. So there's a lot of change coming. And I think AI will continue to be the big force changing everything. But go ahead, Lalo. You want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess just in earlier in the conversation, you talked about us possibly talking about not Mexico. I'm sorry, about Trump Xi and the summit coming up today. show is supposed to drop on Thursday when the event or the meetings are supposed to be taking place. I've listened to and heard, I mean, in fact, the trade guys might have been a version of what I've heard, but I've also, listened to other news podcasts or whatnot, and they all seem to be and agree. I don't know what your thoughts may be, but there's a few things that folks are hitting on in the media. Number one is Wall Street versus Main Street. Like Wall Street is doing great, but when you go to Main Street and you talk to folks out there, how good are they really doing? There's two different stories. Number one. Number two is the other one is that this Trump Xi meeting is very common and very, very similar to not just Trump himself, but several other administrations where they go into a big summit or big meeting like this. And really the goal is to, and especially in this case, they're talking about, and this is not my original idea, but more like I tend to agree with the consensus, is that the goal is to not blow things up worse than they are right now. Right. I mean, the thing is that there's a lot of tensions in trade. There's a lot of tensions geopolitical. I mean, China depends a lot on fuel. I mean, a lot on fuel. I mean, this war is certainly not helping any, so anyway, so apparently the goal is mostly to avoid anything from getting any worse or blowing up, which is what kind of like that fine line that people are a little bit afraid of, because anything can set off Trump and there goes everything, right? Like things can really turn for the worse. But what were your thoughts? I mean, going into this podcast earlier, you had talked about maybe us touching on this. Anything you see? I mean, of course, you're not too much political. You like to talk about the data more than anything. But what are you thinking?
I think you nailed it. I think both of them would be happy if they walk away and there's no damage done. Because I think she will want to talk about Iran and Trump will want to talk about trade, U.S. exports into China. And I think neither wants to talk about what the other wants to talk about. I mean, there's a Taiwan. There's lots of things to talk about for these, right?
Right.
What I read is that China is very interested in seeing the U.S. change its language just slightly on how we refer to Taiwan, because with this war going on and with our engagement in the Middle East and to some extent also in Ukraine, we don't want to have to try to defend Taiwan. We really don't. We haven't had a world war since 1940s, and we certainly don't want to have one again. And I don't think either side wants one, and I don't think it's going that way. But you don't want anybody to make a mistake at this point. That could be dangerous. But I don't think anybody will. But I'm optimistic that there will be resolution in the Middle East at some point that will be satisfactory. I mean, what Trump's going to need now is, this is what happens to every president in the Middle East. Unfortunately, you just get trapped there, and it's happened to very few presidents come out of the Middle East looking like a saint. They almost all come out going, "Well, I got what I could get. I'm getting out." So Trump needs to be able to come out saying, "I got something." And right now, Iran is, I mean, I don't know, saying we're not giving a lot. I mean, right now, what Iran has done is said, well, we're now charging for the Strait of Hormuz, and they didn't used to charge for that. So it's a complicated situation. I just finished a 992-page biography of Harry Truman, and it's particularly fascinating now. But and I've read a bunch of presidential biographies. That's a job that nobody in their right mind would want to have. It's just what a tough position you find yourself in. Do we want Iran to have that role that they've had in the Middle East? Of course not. Is it worth the price we are going to have to pay to end that? And can it be ended? I don't know the answer to that question. China is a big economic threat on some level, but I think as long as we're buying their stuff, they're pretty happy with us, right? Do they have territorial aims? On some level, they do, right? They're trying to fill in some islands. They're trying to they want control over their hemisphere much in the same way that we have control over ours, right? China's coming into South America in a big way, big
Right.
way.
Right.
It's certainly interesting times. I don't know. There's guys above my pay grade who I'm glad are working on this kind of stuff, because it's complicated stuff. Look, China's got 1.3 billion people. We've got 300 million. That's My father used to joke he was very nervous when my mother was pregnant with our fourth child because he'd read somewhere that one in every four children born in the world was Chinese. But sorry, that's a head joke. But but they've got four people to every one we have. And reading the Truman book, I saw coming out of World War II the incredible damage that was created out of that war, and how the U.S. then essentially took over, did the UN, the Marshall Plan, World Health Organization, precursor of the World Trade Organization, all these things to try to, and we put bases all over the world. I don't know if this number is still accurate, but the last number I heard was the U.S. spends 25 times more than any other country on its military. We have not used, for the most part, we have not used the military to take territory.
Right.
We usually use the military to keep the peace. Now, someone else might argue so that we can rule the world, and so we can continue to be the strongest economy. But that's not what Russia's deal is. Russia's trying to take territory.
Yeah.
Russia wants back what they lost, right? China has not taken an enormous amount of territory, but boy, they are, the book I'm reading now, it's getting into all the spying they do on the U.S. I mean, we all do spying, of course, but they're tough competitors, let me tell you. There's a lot of presidents that have tried to stand up to China, and Trump has taken it to like these hockey sticks I was showing you on those charts. Trump's taken it to a whole nother level. His aggressiveness with China, saying, we want to slow this train down. It's a tough train to slow down. But it's a great deal. But go ahead.
Well, let me ask this question: is that out of all this, and the ups and downs, I mean, it's a roller coaster as far as trade and global trade and all that. Are there any export markets that you see that may be underappreciated?
Well, I mean, speaking of countries with 1 billion people, there's India.
Mm-hmm.
What you can say about types of government, democracy is the best, but it can be messy. Autocracy can be horrible, but it can get things done quickly. India is essentially a democracy, and it's hard to change. You can't just say tomorrow, here's the rule as easily, but there's 1 billion people there. There's got to be great opportunity for the U.S. there. But there's certainly additional opportunity in our hemisphere. But back to we talked a little bit about the trade deficit. It's down 400 and change to 200 and change this year. But I think it's the last 5 years now. It's been more than $1 trillion. It's a big number. And you can't really eliminate that unless Americans quit buying so much stuff. And I'm not sure that is what we want. But for us to buy that much stuff, you need China and Japan and other countries to buy our treasuries. And so we are very interlinked.
Well, you made a statement though yesterday. I was talking about the U.S. deficit.
Yeah.
The debt now I'm talking about.
Right.
And the best way to deal with that, quite frankly, is from a government perspective, is we've got to stop spending so much money from a government as a government entity and get that debt down, because that is just unreal. I mean, our economy is is what, 22 trillion, I think, and our national debt is 39 trillion. Oh, I mean, this is unreal. Where our debt is higher than our economy in a year. We've got to get this. Just stop and think. If we even went back to 20 trillion in debt, then that alone would be a significant boost to our economy. But we've got to cut back. It's not a case of a problem with revenues, because the tax revenues keep going up. It's a case that we're spending it faster than we're bringing it in. So, that's one of the things that we still have to deal with. It would have a positive effect, in my opinion, even on the global market.
Well, absolutely. No, and the problem is there's 3 big pockets. There's defense, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And those are, which one do you want to cut? You know?
I get it.
Because everything else is just, nickels and dimes. But yeah, it's, but what gives me hope though is the other book I'm reading is called Plenty, and it's by a guy from McKinsey, a guy named Mark Canal, and 2 other authors. And it's a book there's similar books that have been written, that the world has the capability now to feed everybody, to eventually get everybody housed, to eventually it can happen. The question is, will we do it? I like to think the best thing we could do is create additional export markets for our goods and services. And that's hard to do when you're competing against countries that have much lower labor costs. But we're well, that sounds so much like an American, but we're the most innovative country in the world right now. Remember, China doesn't allow Facebook in, doesn't allow Google in, doesn't allow LinkedIn in, doesn't allow PayPal in, doesn't allow these big box. Do we do that? We don't do that for the most part. TikTok now. I think, what's up with TikTok? Is it gone in the U.S.?
It's
Is it now a US?
It's still going, but
it's a U.S. company now. Is that what it is?
Partial ownership.
That part of it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but generally speaking, we let people express themselves and start their businesses and run their businesses and make business deals. Some would say too much, maybe, but I'm just at the end of the day, I'm an optimist that democracy will rule, and capitalism will rule. And we're making real progress. Right now we sort of step back into a Cold War sort of mindset, but I think Russia's not that kind of a threat that's going to last forever. And China's a different kind of threat. It's more economic. I don't think China wants to start a war with the U.S. I really don't. I think they would like to just maybe run the world or something, or run at least a big chunk of it. But yeah. So anyway.
Okay.
Well, I tell you, we need to wrap up here. I mean, we could go from one topic to another and keep going into, because there's a lot, as you just said, when you start talking about the economies and the markets, it's a very complex deal. So in looking at it, folks, I would say you need to look and just study. Even what we were talking about WorldCity, it's the rabbit hole. You get in there, you need to have some folks that are proficient. If you got any economists or folks that are, look at the economies for your business, that's a great source to look at it and see and compare to other data that you might want to look at for opportunities for your business. Because expanding your markets is key, whether it is domestically or internationally. Your sources is another thing, is finding sources or multiple sources. Obviously, a lot of companies seem to be moving away from China. I thought it was going to be temporary. It seems to be more of a structural, more permanent supply chain change in things. So,
well,
anyway,
that tied in with COVID. We realized the danger of all being locked into one. So the two at the same time happened, and it made a lot of sense. And I think it is permanent.
I can't wait to see your next report. I mean, I did commit to having you for every quarter once you get the data all crunched up and processed. But I'm just kind of curious to see, and of course we'll wrap up here, but I'm just curious to see how that's going to change or look like going into the election, because I'm thinking that's the sprint right there. No, I mean, I'm thinking that's where something might change, something might be a little different going into the midterms elections, just to get some favorable votes in your side for any one of the representatives and or senators that are looking to either get reelected or bump someone off. So anyway, I'm just kind of curious to see that.
Yeah, it'll be a different world in 3 months. You can bet that, because I think inflation numbers just came out. They're a little bit high.
Yes.
And that it's not surprising. I mean, that's what you would expect. And with all this gerrymandering going on both sides, it disheartens me. It's just, I like winning. I don't like winning when I have to cheat.
Right. Yeah. Right.
It's sad. It's really sad. But I just hope that we'll be in a better place in 6 months, but we're not in a terrible place today either. So
right, exactly. Yeah. So we'll see how that report comes out in 3-4 months from now when we have you back on, because that'll be right before the election. So
yep. But you guys are doing a great job. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken.
I appreciate that, folks. Really appreciate your support for the Simply Trade podcast. Lalo and I enjoy interacting with y'all, and of course our guests and whatnot. So like us, share us, make your comments, and y'all have a great day.